Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Eating at a Meeting with my finger here. And I am excited to be back in my office after 2 weeks of travel and like 6 podcast episodes in that time frame. So it's nice to go back live once a week and to bring you Ali Cox, who this woman right here from Noble West in California. She is an agriculture and food ingredient marketing visionary and founder of Noble West, which is an award-winning marketing consultancy that specializes in the entire agricultural ecosystem, the food system, food world, from fresh produce and nuts to dairy and ag tech. It works in all aspects of agriculture. So welcome to the show, Ali.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. Excited to be here and excited to be live. This is fun.
I know. Yeah. Most
like
podcasts are just like, let's record them offline. I'm like, no, I want to make you.
No, I'm here for it. I am a retired athlete, so this feels like game time, and I love that. It's always a little shot of adrenaline. So thank you.
Okay, so just on that note, were you excited about the rowing teams this year on the Olympics because you're a former rower, or you're a rower from the Olympics?
Yeah, you mean that you're referring to the Paris Olympics?
Yes.
Very happy for the men. The men's team did really well. Our women's team really struggled. So this was the first Olympics in 20 years that we didn't bring home a medal. So yeah, so we've got some digging deep to do, and I think working on some strategy and some coaching. And of course, now my job as an alumni is really just fundraising and whatnot. So yeah, lots of work to be done, but I love rowing. And I have to tell you, it took me like a full 2 weeks to recover from the Olympics because I had like alarms set at 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. and I just like could not focus. So I'm so glad that it's actually over. But I just love rowing so much, and it's just such an amazing sport. So thank you for asking and indulging me and allowing me to talk about rowing because it's truly one of my favorite things.
Well, good. And one of my friends, Mandy, I sent her your link because she's a rower, and all 3 of her kids row, and one of them's at Michigan. Her daughter Gracie's rowing for Michigan now.
Oh my gosh! Okay, that's an amazing program. I love Michigan. Yeah, it's a great program.
And then just for everybody, if you look at Allie's LinkedIn profile, there's a comma OLY behind that, her name, and that means that she's an Olympian, which I thought that was really interesting when I looked it up. So yeah. Well, thank you for supporting us and representing us.
Get credit for the hard work. I think that's all that really does. So
no, that's okay. All right, so now I want to bring you back into the soil instead of the ocean to the water, to the soil of the U.S. here, and talk about what you do as a marketer. But I also want everybody to know that you're a fifth generation farming, right?
On both sides.
On both sides of your family.
Yeah. Okay. Matriarchal and patriarchal. So.
Well, so that's amazing. So what, as a marketing person and a farmer, tell us what Noble West does. And then I want to get into the whole food system.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for touching on my history. So I think that's really kind of it's an authentic, I think it's more of like an authenticity check mark at this point. Like, is she authentic to be talking about the food system? Yes. But truly, I believe that like what got us here is not going to get us there. And I'm so just thankful and grateful for my childhood and everything that my, ancestors have done and like family has done. But we really have a lot of work to do in the food system to make sure that we're able to eat basically domestically grown food, frankly, that's healthy and safe. But Noble West is a marketing agency. We are technically remote. So we have teammates that are mostly based throughout the West Coast now. We did have an office in Columbus, Ohio for quite a bit of time. But we help grower, packer, shippers. We help growers tell their story. We are really focused on creating more value for food that's grown very well by farmers and really creating a little bit more synergies and understanding and frankly education through really creative marketing for consumers to understand more about where their food comes from and for farmers to understand more about what consumer preferences are and how to tell their actual story of the good work that they are doing to farm. So I would call ourselves like really ingredient specialists. So the ingredient that it takes to grow the food is what I am so passionate about, even more so than, like I always say, we care about the ingredients in the granola bar, not just how the granola bar tastes. We actually care how it was grown. So that is something that I will, continue to. And what's been so interesting, Tracy, which I'm sure you're going to kind of get to, is like, we have Noble West start. So I think 5 years ago, I said, okay, I want to be specialist. I want to just focus on agriculture and the food system. And at that point, saying we're only going to take ag felt very almost risky. Like, wow, that's really narrow. And now it is become like we're getting even more narrow, where we are like getting into regenerative agriculture and upcycling, and we're building out an organic we're building an organic foundation to help farmers if they want to go organic. I mean, we're getting so much more nuance. And I think, frankly, we've become more of an agriculture sustainability agency. And I'm here for it, and I love it. And I just like that we're able to kind of deepen our, deepen what the impact that we're able to provide for our clients and the environment.
Well, and I just put the title of this show up here because it's Behind the Plate, Why Ingredient Stories Matter for Event Menus. And I think what you just said, I really want to dig into that because, and listening to you on quite a few other podcasts and reading up on you too, you talk a lot about consumer direct to consumer, right? Well, we as event planners, we have one other middleman, or probably 5 other middlemen in the middle.
Oh my gosh. Well, more than that,
yeah.
Tracy, we could dig into that. Oh, way more than 5.
Yeah. To where it gets to that plate where I'm sitting down in an event at a convention center or, whatever. And it's really kind of scary. And I talk regenerative agriculture, and I teach people that, what that is as an event planner, but does their caterer even know what that means, right? Their food service person. But I like the fact that you want to talk about that, what the ingredient. And you said in the beginning there, you said food that's made well. So, and then you said regenerative and upcycled. So I want to understand that definition of made well, because
I think grown well. Right.
Grown well. Okay.
It's really grown. I mean, that's really, it's like where the ingredients come from, how they're sourced, who's sourcing them, how is the ingredient getting from the farm or the plant or the mill or the processing plant or the packing shed to the end user. How many hands is that going through? Who's touching it? And frankly, what I really care about is how many people are making money off of that transaction.
Because then, and I've listened to you, because then the farmer's making like that, a fraction of that.
With the operational costs continuing to skyrocket.
Yeah.
So,
and
are you familiar with slow food?
Go into that.
Yeah, but I love talking. I absolutely love talking about events. That actually was how I got my start working in the agency world in New York City. So I mean, very familiar with talking about all things events. But really, the first event that I went to, and this was, I think I still worked at IMG in New York. This was like in maybe 2006 or 7, 8, when the slow food movement, which was, I think, started in Italy, came to Fort Mason in San Francisco. And my friend Dominic Phillips produced it, DPM, great event producer, especially in food and beverage events. And that slow food, that was the first time I ever saw like actual ingredients marketed for their integrity and for their like novelty. This was novelty. And it was so educational to basically everybody other than like Alice Waters, frankly, and like, right. And I just was like, okay, there's like recycled, like silverware, and we're reusing our silverware. And there is like bamboo, like plates that are like more recyclable, like all like this whole thing. And it was just, and the whole hero of I've been to a ton of food shows. I mean, I've been to a ton of them. I go to them. Still nothing made that impact like that show did. And it just was like, that was why we were there, was to explore and to honor and to cherish and to educate ourselves on like the beautiful, like, integrity of the ingredients and really hero the farmer. The most popular persons that were at that event were the
Mhm.
farmers,
They
and
are.
I know, and that to me is like with my childhood, it's sort of like, oh, I just that was so normal to us that it was just like, well, yeah, you go to work and like then you harvest it. You know what I mean? Like it was
Mhm.
not anything novel about it as it is now, and especially how it was then. So I still think about that slow food event that I went to, and I think there was like maybe 2 of them, and then they kind of broke off into like smaller events, but that was just such it
Well,
was just
you
the
need to
best
go
event.
to Turin. I've been
Yeah.
to slow food. I've been twice, and it is mind blowing.
Yes.
Slow
Yes.
food Terra Madre Salon de Gusto. It's a long word, but
Yep.
it is a fantastic event that's held every other year. So the next one is in 2026. Yeah.
Yep. For sure.
Yeah, but it does. It honors the grower.
Yeah. And I just think like that is that a cheap event? No. Is that I mean like it was a big ticket item, and it was like, and the sponsors that showed up for it were amazing. But it was really like the first time like we really celebrated that. And as far as like big events, I think that people are just getting more. I mean, I know even like in like from my personal life, like, I'm follow like some health gurus because I'm always trying to be healthier. And it's sort of like, yeah, if
Hmm.
you really want to be healthy, you need to stay home and cook yourself, and you need to know where your ingredients come from.
Hmm.
And that's just how it is. Unless you're going to a restaurant that is like, that's part of their DNA and that's part of their reason for being.
Hmm.
It's kind of their sourcing. But um yeah, I could go on and on, and I just think that there's been a lot, not even just events, but like, I was flying this weekend and just I was like kind of just getting so excited about like what was in the JetBlue terminal, frankly, about like,
Hmm.
and I just think there's just like a real movement in sourcing, but you got to be willing to pay for it, and you need to be willing to find your consumer that will pay for it. And I think that's where Noble West is really coming in. It's sort of like, let's honor these ingredients with like great
Hmm.
creative, beautiful, and also reaches the target audience through really more proactive media planning and whatnot. Because I want this to go mainstream, and I think you opened,
Hmm.
Tracy, like the supply chain is what I really care about, less than more, less than what's happening at the farmers markets or your local
Hmm.
CSAs. Well, I think that's fantastic. I really care about the supply chain as a whole.
Yeah. I'm going to just mention one thing that I saw at Salon de Gusto. I don't know what year it was, but it was a whole um, presentation by the coffee company Lavazza. I think that's right. And the
Yes.
pictures that they took of the farmers from all over the
Mhm.
world, the coffee growers, and that just was mind blowing and showed their stories, etc. But
Mhm.
I think the supply chain is really, really important for us to understand. And one thing that I put on my slides when I educate people, here's the event food chain, and it's just the front of it's kind of like, here's your attendee, here's your hotel sales manager or convention center sales manager, the event planner, then the event manager at the venue, and then there's the chef, and then there's all the sous chefs, and then there's the line cooks, and then there's the preppers, and then there's the bartender, the catering manager or the front of a house banquet manager, and then the bartender, and then all the servers. I mean, that's just that part. That's not even talking about the behind the house, behind the chef,
We're not
right?
even talking about where how it got there.
Got there. Right, exactly. And we need to.
Yeah.
And one of the things on pricing, because I want to talk about that too, is that meeting planners are being hit hard. I mean, a buffet lunch now, let me just tell you, starts at $85 per person and goes to 92 plus 25% tax gratuity and tax on top of that. So for one lunch, buffet lunch, it's
Mhm.
about $110 per person.
And which market?
That's pretty much general. I've
On
had that
on
in Florida.
average.
I've had that on Austin. Yep,
Mm,
on average. And
mm.
that's probably not Des Moines, Iowa, but I don't know what the quality of the food, I mean, and I'm not saying the quality of the food is that great on
Mhm.
any of those markets. So
Mhm. Mhm.
why? I mean, because of that supply chain that you're
Mhm.
talking about, right?
Yeah, but I also think, like, I also think it goes back to I mean, I love talking about event marketing. Like, this is so
Yeah.
fun. I feel like I'm like back in like the good old days of like event marketing, part of my career. But like also like, how is that event being marketed? Is it being marketed that you are going to go have like a rubber chicken dinner, or like, or is it being marketed like you are going to go have this experience that also includes culinary? And I think the whole point of this conversation is
Hmm.
how do we incorporate like the quality of the food into the event,
Hmm.
like marketing. And that's where I would say, well, it all starts with ingredient marketing, because if
Hmm.
the carrot farmer doesn't know how to talk about the carrots, if they don't, thumbs up, if they don't understand how to talk about like the ingredients and like marketing that, then they have no brand. So as they're marketing it through to
Hmm.
to the chef does not know what to put on the menu. They don't have the right stuff. And then it's just commoditized. And the more we
Hmm.
utilize commoditized food, like the less like important it becomes in the experience. So then it becomes about some other story other than the food. And if we are trying to have like a more classy event where like the quality of the food really matters, and people who are going there expect a nice meal and they want it to be a certain way, kind of like when you go to a restaurant and you see like
Hmm.
actually a thoughtfully written out menu with like their sourcing information, that's probably more localized or regionalized. That is, I think we all understand what we're paying for. It helps with
Hmm.
sticker shock. It helps me understand, like, okay, I can get excited about this. And instead of talking about how expensive the ticket is for the event, I'm
Right.
going to understand, like, oh, I'm getting excited about it because I'm going to see that there's some value, and it becomes a value alignment of like ethos. Like, I care about this kind of food and these kind of sourcing things, and I am excited for this experience, and so I'm willing to pay for it. Now, if I don't know that information and I walk in sort of already annoyed that I've overpaid for something because I haven't been educated, I think that's on the event. The event has not done a great job of marketing themselves.
Well, and I think that also goes back to the hotels and the convention centers as well, and
Mm.
marketing where they source their food from,
Yeah.
right?
We're
Yeah.
working on a project right now, Tracy, that's so interesting. And one of our it's a tea. It's a rock certified, so regenerative organic certified tea. And they have found a hotel chain that also
Mhm.
has casinos, and they have a very intentional like minority sourcing policy, and they're trying to
Mhm.
encourage more minority um, owned brands to like get on their basically
Mhm.
their sourcing roster. And how they're marketing that, I found very interesting. And I don't want to give too much away because we're kind of in the middle of this project, but how that chain has been intentional about that has been very interesting to me. And they are utilizing it as one of their differentiating qualities from their competitors. So if you are somebody who, now, do I think this is going to work in mainstream marketing? Probably not, because it doesn't involve price and
Mhm.
whatever. But if you're somebody who really cares about like those sort of issues, I think you'd feel really pretty good about spending your money. And I feel like as
Mhm.
event planners and as event marketers, our whole existence is like expectation management. Like, expect to stand in this line, expect to have this experience. And I feel like that's sort of like setting yourself up for success as people are doing their due diligence, whether they want to go spend their hard-earned money or not.
So true, and I have an idea on who that is, but we won't delve into that. But they were talking about one chain was talking about it at IMAX a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and
Um,
This is Bally's, which I actually thought was so interesting.
oh, and but Hyatt's doing the same thing.
Yeah. So, I
And
mean, like, let's
so yeah,
champion that, and if that's what we
yeah.
care about, like, that's where we're gonna spend our money, right?
Right, yeah, yeah, and I was talking to one of the chefs from Atlanta about that and what and he's very big proponent of it, and I actually met him at the farmer's market shopping from the local
Oh
farmers
my gosh, I
on
love
Sat when
that.
I used to live there, yeah,
I love
Chef
that.
Thomas. So telling the story of the ingredients, how
Mhm,
does it how does it actually benefit the farmer and then the end consumer?
mhm. By telling that ingredient story, you are basically providing and assigning value to it.
Okay.
You're saying, this is how it was grown and by whom. They use these kind of maybe socially responsible labor practices.
Mhm.
They have a certain practice of whether it's conventionally grown, whether it's organic, whether it's regeneratively grown. You're talking about how the mindset of the farmer and their farming practices, and because the real challenge here is that there's like fundamental like misalignment in that farmers are compensated based on yield. How much can they grow per acre? How many pounds, how many nuts to the acre, how many stalks, how many bags, how many bushels, how many cartons. Um, and consumers are that they don't care about that. They care about the
Mhm.
highest quality grown food that they might have, that they can get at the right price. And
Mhm.
so that is just a fundamental misalignment. And so I think that for farmers, by talking about that, and I don't know if it's actually the farmer's job to talk about this, that's a whole nother thing I like to dive into too.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
by telling that story by either the processor, the mill, the market, or the farmer, whomever, by telling that proper story, that is where you're giving the consumers the opportunity to make a great decision and to make a decision based on their values. By not telling that story, by not feeling like you frankly want to tell that story, that's where you are just like commoditizing it. It's a commoditized experience. It's a faceless, nameless ingredient that just is needed, right? And and I just think that it's been associated with being cheaper, and in many ways it is, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's what consumers want, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're doing right by the farmers.
Okay, so on that podcast, I listened to you chatting on the Regenerative by Design podcast, right?
Mhm.
And there was a conversation that you and Joni had about Walmart
Mhm.
because Walmart gets a bad rap
Mhm.
and about their food, but you
Mhm.
said that they are doing so much more in this sustainability realm of and putting the standards
Mhm.
on who they're buying from.
Mhm.
And and but they still
Mhm.
get that bad rap. And you could also say Costco. I mean, Costco doesn't have a bad rap, but Costco apparently is the number one seller of organic food in the country.
I'm sure.
Uh,
I'm sure of it.
yeah. So, but how do we but when you go into Costco or Walmart, you're not really thinking about that farmer, right? How do
No,
you
you're
change that narrative?
well, I don't know if you need to think about the farmer, and I think that that's,
Okay.
like, a misconception, and I think
Okay.
that the agriculture's done a terrible job of, is how many, like I mean, how many commercials have you seen when it's like, the farmers waking up at dawn, and they're with their dog, and they're about to go get in their old pickup, and that, right? Like, you are
Uh-huh.
basically marketing their lifestyle. You're
Mhm.
not marketing
Right.
their crop. You're not marketing
Okay.
the
Mhm.
integrity of the food. You're marketing their lifestyle. And I gotta tell you, I don't know why the ag industry and that frankly disassociates food from ag. And I think that the food industry is the agriculture industry. And that's
Mhm.
where how many other industries are we seeing that? Like, are we seeing like a banker get up early and get on their train and do their 2 hour commute, tying their shoes?
Mhm.
No. Are we
No.
seeing like the factory worker like getting on the bus and doing their big commute to get to where they're going and going and working a hard day? No, we're marketing like whatever the output of that product is. And that's where I just think there's so much wrongness. And if I am a mom, which I am, in a grocery store where I go, and I am thinking about like, should I spend the money on this organic or rock certified piece of produce versus the other one that is a third of the price? I'm not thinking about the farmer. I'm thinking about feeding my family as healthfully
Mhm.
and as mindfully as I possibly can based on my family's bioavailability and nutritional needs. That's what I'm thinking about, right? And if
Mhm.
I'm feeding my friend who has cancer and I'm taking them a warm meal, I'm thinking about having the least amount of pesticides possible that I can possibly deliver to them. And that I'm not thinking about the farmer. I'm thinking about what I need to use it for. Just like thank you to the
That's
factory
true.
worker who got up to go they commute through the snow and everything to go build the car. I'm not thinking about them. I'm thinking about, is this car going to drive me and my family safely? That's all I'm thinking about. And so that's where I have a whole soapbox clearly about that. But back to Walmart. Walmart, they put out a claim that by 2030, they want to avoid like 1 billion metric tons of carbon emissions. That's one of their goals. One of the ways that they have really dove deep into this is through their produce project. So with Project Gigaton, that's where farmers, if they want to sell in Walmart, I think it's like November 5th every year, they need to submit their Project Gigaton application, which shows that they have accomplished a 104-point checklist of sustainability, proving that they are sustainable. And this is for conventional and organic. It's not just organic. And this is where are their on-farm water uses good? Are their packaging machine? Are their water use? Are they net zero in their packing houses? I mean, this is like the whole checklist. And so that's where that's why, like, everybody's always surprised, myself included. I was such a hypocrite when I lived in New York and was like a single woman working in fashion and events. Like, I was like, I would never shop at Walmart. And now I'm like, oh my God, I shop at Walmart every week. But really, that's where that produce, and I've been really, really impressed with that.
That's awesome. And we need more people to be doing that. I mean, and then I'm going to bring that to kind of SDG, well, Sustainable Development Goals, which are from Slow Food, or they're not from Slow Food, but the UN, but then also the ESGs that corporations are having to adhere to, right?
Yeah.
And when we're looking at that, it's amazing, bringing it all the way full circle to the company cafeterias and to the events that people are hosting, based on those things. Is that trickling all the way down? Probably not yet. Right?
No, but I would also argue like the ESG, and this is where Noble West is going. There's like squarely, because this is the next 2 years of my life. It's all I want to focus on is because, again, this is how we change things at scale is, there are, every CEO that works anywhere in food, from Kraft Heinz to Del Grosso to Red Gold, which is, the McDonald's tomato ketchup company. I mean, like, this is where every single CEO is like putting out food sourcing ESG goals, their claims. And we are, that is something where a lot of times the manufacturer, the processor of the tomatoes to make the ketchup, or the onion manufacturer, the dicer and slicer, whatnot, they are actually doing a lot of things right, and they're just not taking credit for them. Like, as far as, if you look at we work a ton in ag technology, the investments, the millions and millions of dollars of investments that are happening in ag tech, in robots, in contamination efforts, in food safety it is expansive. And that's where I just want the food. I want the agriculture industry and the food industry to get some credit for that.
Okay.
For the
work. And how do we do that? Is that through advertising, or?
Oh, it's by the ag industry, the food manufacturing industry, getting off their duff, spending some money on marketing, telling a proper story, and giving with a bow, ladder it up to your customers, right? So this is where you're talking about, like, don't make them ask you for it, that's where it's sort of like there are sustainability people that are in these companies, but they're just like responding, like proactively ladder it up. And I think that's where we're going to see that the food industry and the ag industry can make a bigger return on investment, is if they're giving the marketers, the brand marketers, what they need, because they know consumers want that. And it also, like, helps them accomplish their ESG goals. That's where we are going to do ourselves a service, because in many cases, these food manufacturers, like again, the slicers, the dicers, they're actually like creating like, the ingredients that are going to go into everything else, the pizza sauces and the everything. That's where most of them have hundreds of contract farmers who are growing the food, are putting it in a truck and sending it off to you. And if those folks can get a bigger return on investment for their effort of farming, we're all going to be a lot better off.
Yeah. And it reminds me of going to the local farmers market here in my small little town of New Bern. I'm going to say I go to 3 farmers directly because I know what they're doing. I've talked to them, and I probably should go meet the other ones and talk to them a little bit more about what they do too. But I mean, for 4 years now, I'm like, I know exactly what they do, and I trust them. And I mean, but that same thing is I know their story, and they're getting the credit, right, where the credit's due. I want to ask a question about the marketing. And I think Joanna asked you a similar kind of question, but and actually I want to take it even further back. I heard Marion Nestle years ago say that back in the 80s, the food manufacturers sued for freedom of speech. So they could put whatever they want on the front of the box or on the back of the box. The only place they can't lie is in the nutritional information, right? So how do we trust what you're putting out? And there's so many terms. There's cage free, there's whatever, farm raised, all of these different terms. How do we know what's truthful these days?
Okay, so
sorry, that's a very loaded question.
Lots of thoughts. And yeah, I think what's sad is that there are shadows of doubt, is what I think is sad. And how that has come to be is, I have lots of thoughts on that. I think most of it stems from the agriculture industry being scared to tell a story to influencers, to the press, and just not wanting to deal with it. Because frankly, like if you're a farmer, you start farming because you are fine being on your own and taking risk on your own. You're typically quiet. You're typically not somebody, you're like, a lot of people in my family where they're not interested, like that's not their job. Their job is to grow the food. And so what's happened is there are a couple bad players who now have the eye in the ear of a lot of folks, and then it's spread. And I think that's why we always say, tell your story, and that falls on deaf ears. So, I mean, I think that if we are, I'll kind of reframe, I'm not going to answer your question directly, but I'll reframe it, Tracy.
That's fine.
That if you are shopping in a grocery store and you see an orange that was grown in Mexico sitting next to an orange that was grown in the United States, and you see that orange grown in Mexico is quite a bit cheaper, I can guarantee you there is those farmers are not being audited. They don't have an association that is being audited. There's no third-party audits happening. There's no salmonella or contamination like crisis, like prevention happening at the farm level. And so by default, I just am going to stand with like, you need to be buying domestic food. That is the number one, where there are USDA criteria, there are auditors happening, most have associations, there are food safety metrics, things that do not happen internationally. Now, some of the big conglomerates like the Doles and whatnot that are grown internationally, they are more advanced in this, but at the same time, like they're also sourcing, like from a traceability standpoint, that is a wild web. There are a lot of 5 to 10 to 15 acre tiny little farmers who are part of their sourcing. They're part of their sourcing strategy, and that is where, my God, those folks are going to do anything they can to get a crop by any means they have. And so I would just sort of say, like trusting that the USDA and trusting that like there are and state by state, I mean, I would argue the CDFA, California Department of Food and Agriculture, and the Department of Pesticide Regulation, those are like, this is the most regulated state in the entire country, which I would argue is like we are the most regulated farming environment globally. It's also the most expensive, which means that the farmer has to get the most yield per acre as possible to even stay in business. So that's where I say like it is broken. And if we do not decommoditize, there will be more and more of the same.
So how do we decommoditize? And then I'm going to throw that on like the amount of food that Walmart buys or the amount of food that MGM buys, you know, to put in all of all of their hotels around the world, or just in Las Vegas, right? How do you decommoditize and go with direct to those farmers?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if you're going to be able to get direct to those farmers in many cases,
Right.
because of brokers. Because the brokers want to make money off the food too. And it's more expensive. And so how sourcing works these days is typically like the brokers are controlling most everything. Not all the time, but everything. Produce terminals look very different these days. Whereas, you know, when I used to like work the phones at Turlock Fruit Company when I was in high school, there would be buyers on the phone, and there still is in some cases. But like there would be like the phone would be blinking, and there'd be 10 different grocery chains that would be on there, and maybe a broker or two. And now it's all brokers.
Well, and I even see that with small catering companies going together, combining into a buying package together, economies of scale, because otherwise their prices would be astronomically high, you know, and that's where the Hyatts and the MGMs of the world, because they have a larger buying, network, right?
Yeah.
So they're reducing their costs, which means the cost of the farmer gets lower. Right? Yeah. How do we, so where does the story start and who does the story go to?
As far as the farmer story and the decommoditization. I think that like for the context of this conversation, I think it's really about like working with chefs and who are planning the meals and are budgeting the meals to really understand how they're going to promote like what they're serving, right? Like, is this part, like, are we naming out the farms by name? Are we talking about the regionality? Are we highlighting the food like and then passing that information on to your target audience member? I think that is really the most important thing. That's who we're marketing to.
Okay. And then that end consumer, in my opinion, is the one buying the food on an event side is the meeting planner. Yeah. And then does the meeting planner and it reminds me though of the Vancouver Convention Center when they redesigned the convention center, and it's over water. You know, I remember them having beverage napkins at the, I don't know if it was the Olympics, but the Meeting Professionals International Conference afterwards, but it shared how many creatures lived below the convention center, or what they did to protect the water, the livelihood of the water below them, and the sea life, you know, to promote that, because people would probably were bashing them because, hey, you're destroying this by building this, right? Telling that story that way. I don't know if they're still doing that story, but I thought it was valuable 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you're right. It's the meeting planner who's working with the chef on food costs, understanding that, having real conversations about it, and then working with the event promoter and the meeting planner to like kind of promote what that experience is going to be. And I also think there's just some transparency and reality. Like, listen, we are looking to have an event that is like very like pro farmer, or we're having it's a culinary, we're looking for a culinary experience. And I think putting that front and center is probably part of is the picture.
Right. All right. I want to go back a little bit too, but the cost, because you mentioned cost a couple of times, and then I brought up cost of the food for a buffet, right? But that cost of that orange but then it brings in seasonality too, right? I'm like, I'm in the grocery store and I'm looking at an orange that's bought, that's grown here in the United States versus
Mhm.
one that was grown and I look at that on blueberries every single time I go and buy blueberries, right? I'm like,
Mhm.
where are those bought from? But how do we it requires seasonality then too, because we
Mhm.
shouldn't be buying those blueberries from Peru.
No. No, 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 no,
No,
not at
no.
all, especially if you don't want ethylene in your berries, because it's gonna
I'm
take
sorry, what?
ethylene, that's the only way. It's called the just in time. It's the just in
Mhm.
time chemical. So, there's absolutely no way that you could put blueberries on a ship unless they're picked completely green and, to get here just in time. Like, so there is ethylene pumped in those trucks, not trucks, containers to make sure that they don't overripe. So in that case, that's where I think your menu planning and the seasonality and the regionality is really critical. And I think we
Mhm.
just all need to just come to terms with we're not supposed to have, unless it's grown indoor in a hydroponic way, we're not supposed to have salad in January. We're not supposed, that's not what we're eating. And that's where just that is, I think, essential.
Yeah. All right, Nancy just posted in here. Please take this in the spirit it is intended. Does the planner, quote, have the time to do the deep dive into the origin of the food versus relying on the chef banquet team to be able to answer the questions? Yeah.
Great question.
No, I'm gonna say no, Nancy, we don't. So that does require the purchaser, which
Mhm.
is the hotel, the chef, to do that for us,
Mhm. But
right?
the meeting planner's job is to understand what along with like the ROI metrics, what are the sustainability metrics? What is the
Mhm.
intent of this event? And the meeting planner's job is then to go RFP or source a venue and partners who align with the mission of whatever that is. I think
Mhm.
that's the meeting planner's job.
Yeah. Well, and I had a conversation with Paul Salinger last week on
Mm.
a different podcast. I was the
Mhm.
guest, and he literally was saying that, like we have to set up our standards. What are we asking for?
Mhm.
How are we choosing that venue? Is
Mhm.
it around the food? And especially if the food is your number one expense,
Oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On your line item budget, it's your number one expense. So that should be a question that you have.
Yeah, and I mean, like, if we go back to, like, the slow food model, like, where they
Hmm.
did the event, the one I'm just referring to the one in San Francisco, it was, like, in a cold and damp place, like, it's like it wasn't at, like, the nicest venue in town, right? Because
Hmm.
that wasn't the intention of this, that wasn't the purpose of it, right? And I think
Hmm.
that, like, maybe Nancy's question, the spirit of it with, is that the meeting planner's job? Well, I think it depends, like, what is the purpose of the meeting? And
Hmm.
what are and also, how can you then turn this experience into a nice recap that does ladder up to ESG goals? Or, like, how do we put that back into the marketing strategy? Does that go into the annual investor report? Does that go into our annual marketing recap about, like, our intention as, like, department or experience?
Hmm. Right.
Get some
Exactly.
bang for your buck with that, right?
Right, exactly. All right, so how and where can consumers and or meeting planners find out more information about farmers and how food reaches their shopping destination? How do we find that out?
Well,
How?
okay, I think consumers would be just doing the good old Google searches and probably
Hmm.
talking to their produce manager. And then the produce manager's like, okay, well, we get it from this broker. Okay, then you could probably go and do some homework. It's going to be a hard journey, let me tell you. That's why journalists are like, that's why there's a lot of gotcha. And frankly, I think there's a lot of half truths that are circulating about our industry. But as far as a meeting planner, that's probably an easier conversation because you're already working with the decision makers. That's where I think you're talking to the chef.
Hmm.
They're knowing who I mean, they know who their suppliers are. They beat them up all the time. That's their daily, that's a weekly conversation. They know where they're getting all their food. But I think that's where that is. And then also talking about the intention of it. Like, listen, we really want to have a very like climate or environment driven event here, and this is really important to us, and we are going to be marketing it throughout. It's part of the strategy. Can you make sure that our food is sourced within like these regions or whatnot? And can you develop a menu that is compliant with this? And I think that's the conversation that the meeting planner needs to be having. And the chef does know that information. They know all of that.
But going back to the consumer side too, and just thinking on allergens, right? I mean, the challenges, and even I'm going to say even the listeria stories that have been coming out in the last 2 months, right? The McDonald's,
Beef
thing that
allergy.
just happened. Yeah, and actually, my mom said it was something. They may think it's the onions, who knows? But the quarter pounders with
Yeah.
cheese have all been recalled.
Yeah.
I can't. I guess they're not recalled. They're taken off the menu right now. But
like in the Midwest though, like through that one.
right, yeah, through that middle of that.
Mhm.
But how it, even the consumer finding that out, and I think moms of kids with food allergies or other medically necessary diets, they struggle with that every single day, trying to find out, does your natural flavors contain this ingredient, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's like you said, it's a hard thing to figure out.
Yeah, we have celiac, we have food allergies in this house, and it
Mhm.
is. But it's also where I don't know. I mean, like I have to tell you, the more so than any of our medical providers, I'll tell you who my go-to people are. It's the Celiac Moms Facebook group. I
Mhm.
mean, it is like you could put whatever, and like I think a common thing for kids with celiac that's the hardest transition is like goldfish. Like there are just nothing that is taste just like a goldfish. And so it's sort of like, are there any new products that are like celiac friendly, like goldfish,
Mhm.
and there's a bunch on the market. Of course, my son likes none of them, but that's where I just think that's where we're just always. I think it's the community, and if we're being honest,
Mhm.
like we make 90%, women make 90% of the household decisions, and we are resourceful, and we're not afraid to ask our friends stupid questions, and we're not afraid to like put our neck out there, like if we're trying to like do right by our kids, and
Mhm.
like that's where I am for sure. But I just think that there is information out there. You've just got to scour for it, and
Mhm.
also being curious and taking the time. I think that's the other part is, I do not live I live in a farming community, so we do not have a Whole Foods. But every time I go by a Whole Foods, I walk the aisles because I just want to see like, okay, what's new? I want to find my clients and I want to find out what's new. Same with like a lot of like the food, like the Sacramento Food Co-op is so amazing. And like all the food co-ops, that's where I really spend a lot of time. Of course, I go to all the food shows, but I just think it's like being hungry and searching. There's also Amazon has done a really good job, like kind of curating that. So I would just say it's a lot of research. That's why women are the mind load of being a mom is so exhausting.
I mean, it is really mind blowing of how much you have to do the research. And one of my jokes in the whole thing is like the Bush's baked beans. I'm like, the dog has the recipe. I don't want to know your secret, and I don't want to know your family recipe. I want to know if you're going to kill me,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
and same thing with what you're doing with your clients is marketing their ingredients
Mhm.
and showing off what they're doing and how they're doing it in the right way.
Yeah, like I'll tell you right now, we market a ton of rice and rice that's grown in the Sacramento Valley, Northern California, which is where most short grain and medium grain rice is, which is goes into your sake and it's your sushi rice. It's your short grain. It's a Japanese style rice. And I will only eat it if it's grown from there and Japan. That's it. Nowhere else. I know what kind of water is being used. It's like the sewage water. Like I do not want to do it. And that's where like that ingredient is grown with such integrity that it's the only thing I want to support. And I think that the more people know like all this information, the better. And right now, like there's a ton of innovation happening in China right now. A lot of agriculture. It's really there's always been agriculture in China, like don't get me wrong, but right now there's a ton of investment in it to compete like against a lot of California grown specialty crops because there are some regions that have the right climate. And my goodness, our like work is cut out for us because it is cheap, but the quality and the water contamination and the soil contamination is that's where I'm like I will you could not pay me to eat that.
Which reminds me of the tuna, buying tuna and we've got like 2 minutes.
Mm.
When I look
I
at the
could talk this
can,
for the whole day.
oh yeah, totally.
I mean,
But when it
without a
says
break, I could talk
contain,
about this.
when tuna says contains soy,
Mhm,
I'm like, no, and that's the water. It's because the
mhm.
water that they use
Yeah.
contains the soy. I'm like, why does tuna have soy?
I wanna give a plug on tuna. The
Oh,
absolute safest tuna and the best quality tuna that you can buy is the Kirkland brand at Costco. Um, our
really?
our client is the food manufacturer for it. They have all the technology equipment. I have been told that it like, do not buy it anywhere else. So, just that is my plug.
Wow.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah. Gulf
Yeah,
Tech
and
Gulf
it's
Tech Food Machinery. I will list Luthi. Luthi is the name of it, and they're the manufacturing, equipment, and that is the only tuna I will ever buy forever.
really
Mhm,
wow.
mhm.
Okay.
Forever.
And that's what I mean, those are the little things that you
Yeah,
don't know unless you know your farmer,
I
right?
know.
So, yeah,
Well, yeah, you're sourcing, so
yeah, yeah. All right, well, my last question that I always ask everyone is, what does safe, sustainable, and inclusive mean to you in food and beverage?
mm. I think
And then I
it
have a question over from Instagram. I'll ask you that in a second. Go ahead.
okay, you're managing a lot on that end. I'm just sitting here having conversation. Um, to me, that means food that's grown with integrity by farmers who mean well, who are regulated, who have who are compliant members of their community. That is what sustainable safe, and they can stay in business because are being compensated fairly for their hard work. That's what that means to me.
Okay. Well, and that goes all the way back to slow food.
Mhm.
I
Oh my
mean,
gosh. I mean,
yeah,
slow food is
yeah,
just like it's the mothership.
it is. It is the mothership. Okay, so this is a question from Instagram. Let's post it up here. Fascinating content. How do you understand how do the underserved access better food?
Mhm. Yeah. This is, I think, where understanding food there is a ton of technology that is happening in this. This is a terrible, challenging, situation, but I do wanna underscore there is a lot of ag technology and sourcing mechanisms that are being invested in this. I am working on some of them. Um, but this is where I think understanding big retailers, and this is where like the Walmarts of the world are doing a lot of work at scale because it just sounds like a Walmart commercial. But this is where the larger food systems are donating to food pantries, and I think that is where you probably are going to get the most and supporting those initiatives. So supporting the food pantries and the organizations that have that are serving the underserved, like supporting them with their initiatives, particularly with bioavailability and nutrition, I think is really essential. I hope that helps.
Yeah. Well, and food refrigerator programs, that are made by by chefs and variety of other
Mhm,
things too. So,
mhm. Yeah.
but it is and the fact that Walmart's prices and their standards, again, this is not a Walmart
I
commercial,
know. When does this become? Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know, sync together in a way
Mhm,
that's kind of interesting. All right.
mhm.
And this is the last one. Nancy just said to piggyback on that, food banks purchasing from government food sources, independent brands, do they have similar compliance as you described by Walmart or from the tuna from Costco?
I can't answer that. I really can't. But I am familiar with quite a few USDA programs. One of our walnut clients, actually, they got a USDA grant, and they are packaging the exact same product that they sell to their customers. So I do want to I think the USDA has done a really good job of addressing this. And then I think Michelle Obama did a great job. She
Mhm,
really put a pin on access to produce and healthy.
mhm. Yeah. Nancy, it is a tough question. And there's a lot of people to answer those questions. A lot of people in the food system to answer those questions.
Yeah.
Ellie, thank you.
This was so fun. Thanks for having me, Tracy.
Likewise. You're
Yeah.
welcome. All right. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. All right, everybody, stay tuned for next week. I'm back in the office. I'll be in the office again. Until then, stay safe and eat well. And Allie, stay with me for 1 second. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. And everybody on Instagram too. We had a wide audience on Instagram today. So thank you so
Wow.
much for being here.
Wow.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, and actually, let me put this up real quick. You can reach Ali on Instagram, on LinkedIn, sorry, at Ali Cox. There's her link. All right. Thank you, everybody.